I cordially welcome you all to Tech Bharat 2021, Empowering EduTech and Health Tech. Tech Bharat is an initiative of Laghu Udyog Bharati and IMS Foundation. Tech Bharat is envisioned as a platform to support startups and SMEs and be a guiding light to them in navigating their entrepreneurial journey. We are lucky to have found support from the Government of India and the Government of Karnataka at every stage. We thank the ministers, officials, and representatives of Department of Education, Department of Health and Family Welfare, Department of Science and Technology, CSIR, and AICTE in encouraging us and supporting our vision. We welcome you to this session on healthcare and medical education in India after NHP 2050. Making healthcare innovative in its affordability and accessibility is the biggest challenge the world continues to face. Again, skilling or developing healthcare resources is the biggest challenge for a country like India. India is the fastest growing trillion-dollar economy in the world and the fifth largest overall. India today possesses, as never before, a sophisticated arsenal of interventions, technologies, and knowledge required for providing healthcare to the people. Yet, the gaps in health outcomes continue to widen. The reality is straightforward. The power of existing interventions is not matched by the power of health systems to deliver them to those in the greatest need in a comprehensive way and on an adequate scale. The primary aim of a national health policy is to inform, clarify, strengthen, and prioritize the role of government in shaping health systems in all its dimensions, investment in health, organization, and financing of healthcare services. To discuss this further, we have eminent panelists with us today. First, I would like to introduce Mr. Ravi Shankar, Managing Director at Create Additive Labs. Mr. Ravi Shankar is leading a healthcare startup which is providing innovative solutions and services. He has led efforts in conceptualizing, designing, and setting up a state-of-the-art skill lab for a leading medical college. He has emerged as a pioneer in applying 3D printing for surgical planning and implants. His previous roles involved consulting, strategy, and delivering IT systems and integration at both greenfield and brownfield airports. Mr. Ravi Shankar is the lead inventor for the 3D printed self-actuating expandable smart prosthetics. He has helped the company make inroads into 3D bioprinting for translational research in India. He has worked in various roles from sales, consulting, business management, global industry leadership to global practice management. A heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for accepting to moderate the session. We welcome you. We have Dr. Sachidananda, Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences. He is a pioneer in medical education and has provided human service for medical education. We welcome you to the session, sir. We have Dr. A.C. Ashok, Principal, Dr. Chandrama Dayanand Sagar Institute of Medical Education and Research. He brings over 24 years of teaching experience and over 11 years of administrative experience as Registrar Academics, Principal, and Dean. It is an honor to have you here, sir, and we welcome you.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Ram K. Nair, CEO of Jeeva Raksha Trust, with us. He is a consultant, emergency physician, and trauma specialist, previously based out of UK and now Karnataka, India. A popular face in the faculty circles of Indian and international EM conferences, Dr. Nair is currently working in the NGO sector. We thank you for accepting our invitation, sir, and we welcome you.
Thank you.
I now request Mr. Ravi Shankar to take over the session and moderate. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ishu, and it gives me immense pleasure to welcome an illustrious panel such as this for this discussion. And needless to say, this discussion and any subsequent follow-up has a strong chance of impacting healthcare and medical education in India post the NHP 2015. My name is Ravi Shankar. I'm the co-founder of Create Labs. My brush with healthcare started when Siemens implemented the hospital management systems for the Bhopal gas tragedy victims. where the court had mandated that every beneficiary be identified and be given seamless access from the 8 satellite clinics to a central referral hospital. So this was an eye opener for me in terms of challenges which come when you try to adapt technology for a niche vertical such as healthcare or life sciences. And thereafter, I did have an opportunity to be a advisor and consultant to many leading clients and was an industry thought leader at IBM. But coming back to where I am today at Accreate Labs, I have the pleasure of focusing on healthcare. And we are working on design, research, and application of technology projects such as pre-surgery planning, building skill labs, and applying training. Now, quickly cutting the chase and coming to our panel discussion on hand, I would like to take a few minutes to bring to all our notice a few excerpts from the National Health Policy 2015 and then allow your insight into the policy and your take on what it means for healthcare and education in India. But looking at the policy principles, to pick on a few pertaining to medical education system, the policy definitely identifies and prioritizes on learning and adaptive systems. It also clearly focuses on evidence-based and reflective learning. Evidence-based was always known in medical education, but reflective is a method of learning where people have a chance to look at what they did, how they could have done it, and therefore perform once again after reflecting on what they should probably do better. So, such an approach of reflective learning makes them better skilled. And this is also something which the policy recommends, saying this is a change which is needed when it comes to medical education. All of you are also aware that the erstwhile Medical Council of India had come up with a skill training guideline where the focus was on not just the theory or just looking at something. It was about knowing, then knowing how to do it, then showing that they can do it, and then performing. So these graded steps of learning link to aspects of knowledge, skills, attitude, value, communication, and responsiveness. I think these things, when combined with skills to be learned, is a tall order. Therefore, it is a chance for the pioneers in medical education to see how they see a future medical education given the policy behind us, already 5 years behind us, and the need to go forward. I also would like to mention about one of the objectives which is there in section 3.3.6, which seeks growth and enablement of medical technologies to make healthcare more efficient, effective, and affordable. In India, definitely affordability is a point which outweighs everything else. Therefore, how medical technologies could be made to make healthcare more efficient, and we know that medical education and medical education linked hospitals can play a very big role in reaching out or providing efficient healthcare to patients. And surprisingly, I found one more mention in this section in the National Health Policy, which is the adoption of digital gaming technology as a learning tool. This was a surprise to me coming from a technology side, and the key word here is immersive. I think as long as learning method is not immersive, as long as it fails to capture the attention and full dedication of a participant, I think the takeaway is always limited. So anything, whether it's technology or it's the passion and the way a lecturer delivers, a professor delivers his lecture, it could be anything. As long as it makes the student immersive, he's totally lost in what he's learning. That's the end result we all seek, and that's also what the policy is trying to seek. And it identifies digital gaming as one of those methods. Contrary to this, I would like to bring in a conundrum. There's a research paper titled Innovation in Early Medical Education, authored by Dr. Corey J. Robertson et al. And published on BMC. Here, this doctor proposes that no bells or whistles are required for early medical education. Now, so you have 2 points of view almost on two extremes. One says, use gaming technology to make it immersive. And here there's Dr. Rolfson who says that no bells and whistles are needed for early medical education. So I think there's something which we need to decipher from all of this. And from that, take away what we want to do in India as fit for India, needed for India, and effective in India, and give back something which our bureaucrats and the policymakers to take back, so that in the coming years we see policy as supporting such a transformation and change, and not losing technology for the love of technology, but rather using technology only where it makes sense, only where it makes impact, and then therefore making our medical education fit for the future. I think this is essentially what the policy intended to do: bring the policymakers, medical educationists like yourselves, and the technology people together in the hope that the medical education is fit for the future. Before I sign off and open up for our panel, we also need to recognize that the last 9 months have been hard, and COVID did make a change in this country, like we were discussing in the prelude. And we cannot miss the notable achievements which have happened in this regard when the pandemic hit India, the way it was handled, contained, and resolved. It's worthwhile to mention that India is now a net exporter of PPE kits, and TrueNat, which was an RT-PCR based tuberculosis diagnostic kit, immediately within a matter of weeks became a COVID RT-PCR diagnostic kit and played a key role amongst few more diagnostic kits in handling COVID. So I think we have an opportunity here where we can make quick, rapid moves and get on top of the situation. It's my immense pleasure to welcome this panel, and look forward for our audience as well to have a very interesting and learning experience from your learned experience. And with this, I would like to request Dr. Sachidanand, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, to provide his opening remarks in about 5 to 6 minutes. And then we'll move on to the next three speakers in the order of Dr. Ashok and Dr. Ram. And at some point of time, I would imagine that Mr. Pandey would also join, the Commissioner for Public Health, and we'll bring him in after he joins. Meanwhile, I would like to hand over the stage to Dr. Sachidanand.
Thank you, Dr. Abhishankar, for that introduction. As we stand today, we are amidst the COVID pandemic, and COVID pandemic is one thing. Not only in the last 9 months has changed the lives of all of us, it has changed the way we live, and also put a question mark on many of us livelihood as well. So these are the major changes. But on the health side and the medical education side, it has exposed many gaps and brought to the forefront as to where we were lacking. And it has also emphasized the importance of public health. Public health was a neglected specialty. Now, public health has become much more important, and the public health experts are calling the shots. That's all, and that's true to that fact as well. Apart from this, we are also trying to adapt ourselves to these changes that COVID pandemic has brought, especially in health services and also in medical education. The two cannot be separated because they are both are interdependent. In medical education now, as you know, the colleges were closed, the students went home, the postgraduates were pushed to the hospitals, so they never had any teaching at all. For the last 7-8 months, they lost quite a lot of their academic hours. But thanks to the technology came into a great help on this in this era. We were able to cover most of the theoretical aspects of teaching the students through our learning management systems, through various platforms that were available. We could connect to the students, and to a great extent, we were able to reach out to them. Though some of the students who went out to remote areas and rural areas, they were not able to be connecting to the classes. But majority of them were able to still continue with classes, and we tried to the technology was put to good use. We never thought this could be a medium of instruction, medium of education, and this time the COVID has helped us out in establishing technology and marriage of convenience between technology and medical education. So that was what. Though many students did complain, saying that it is not like classroom teaching, a face-to-face teaching with the teacher. But we had no choice. That's one thing, and we also need to accept the fact that future would also be, blended learning would be the mode of teaching. We would have both online classes and offline classes as well. Offline classes has the disadvantage of traveling to a place, sitting there, being physically present. Whereas online classes, both synchronous and asynchronous type, you have the advantage of logging on whenever you want and listening to whomever you want at any point of time. So that is these are the changes that the technology has brought in, and it had to be one COVID pandemic to let us know what we have at hand and how to use it, make best use of it. So that's what is the thing, and I'm sure this is going to be in the future accepted mode of learning as well. Okay, and added to this, the meetings that used to take place, for policymakers and even protocol makers, treatment, this thing, everything was done online. See, that has reduced travel, that has saved much time, that has also given us a lot of leverage to be at our own place in the comforts of our home, and then at least still keep communicating to whomever we want. So that was the advantage, and I'm sure technology would be used and put to large use in the future to see that these things continue to be benefiting us in whatever way possible. For example, we never had the opportunity of utilizing telemedicine to the great extent. Telemedicine was relegated to last this thing, but now it has come to the forefront. Many of the consultations that took place, even the government legalized telemedicine and teleradiology and all those tele aspects, and many doctors took to this teleconsultations to a great extent, and the patients were benefited. So that's how the technology can be put to good use. And when it comes to medical education part of it, the students who had gone home could be reached through online classes. At least to my knowledge, 80 to 85% of students could make best use of the these online classes. About 10 to 15 had difficulties. Maybe they were in remote areas. They didn't have connections, internet connections. Some of them didn't have laptops and things like that. But by and large, we could reach out to a larger extent of students and keep the academic studies going on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sachidanand. Dr. A.C. Ashok is the Dean. Sir, would like to have your opening remarks.
Yes, very rightly said. The pandemic has given plenty of wrong things, but it has also done a lot of good things. Probably we would have never jumped the gun getting into technology, and the pandemic forced us to do it. The number of innovations, the number of inventions which happened in the last couple of 9 months, probably if you were to put it in a calendar, probably we would not have achieved it in another probably couple of decades. So things, when you push down to the corner, we tend to react and we tend to build it up, and we definitely come out the best. India, unfortunately, has got a large population. We have got something like 136 million people, and those 136 million people have to be served. Currently, what we look at is around 540 medical colleges across the country, and nearly matches about 51-49 vis-a-vis private versus the government sector. So ultimately, how do these young brains which get into the medical school, how do we nurture them? How do we make them innovators? How do we take them to find out what are the felt needs of the country? And how could we make these young tomorrow doctors to make innovations in order to make health not only affordable, it should also be accessible. In a large, diverse country like ours, right from the Himalayas down to the seashore, down to Kanyakumari, the accessibility is one point in terms of physical access itself. Probably in the mountainous regions of the north, it may be very difficult for people to reach across. And not only that, it is the affordability also which taxes us as far as the population at large is concerned. No doubt today when we say that technology is available in Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta and Bangalore, but the same cannot be held in the right sense of mind when it translates into whether it is available in the remotest part of the country. And whether we as doctors are able to do justice to the largest section of the people who are residing in the larger, that is the villages and the urban population, which are maximally affected. The better and the better income group of people, the city bred people, the metro group people, definitely are in a better position to have this care, and they are also able to afford these quality medical care. What we can do to train these young minds? What I always say is, in India, we catch these medical doctors too young compared to many of the Western countries. They have a couple of years in something called medical allied, and we have a slightly mature brain which comes to us in the medical schools. We can always transform them into better educators, better researchers, better scientists, better deliverers, and better understanders. But unfortunately, the fortunate problem of the unfortunate thing is we catch them young. We have them at 17 with us. And this is the time when if we can mold them properly, we will definitely get the brighter and the best of the guys in the future. And they are the doctors of tomorrow. And what I always felt is, it is unfortunate, these medical schools most often, they are in silos. You have a medical college, you have a medical university. There is no translation of research which goes across the boundaries of these medical schools. And what I'm really worked up and I really want, and I want people to listen to it, there has to be interdisciplinary, which unfortunately with a lot of egos and thoughts, we never go across the discipline. In fact, I was the dean for Ramaya Medical College. I had gone ahead and done an integrated museum, wherein I had an anatomy museum with a pathology museum, with a pharmacology museum, and the classes of medicine would be taken in the museum classes. The advantage here was the student could also walk up to what is the pathology and what is the anatomy, so that he could make the difference and find out why would we call these symptoms. Further, also I emphasize on the fact that we need to have transdisciplinary approach. That is where the silos have to break. We need to get across to the engineering science, the basic science, the humanities. All these things are possible if there is a possibility of a university, and the medical school forms one vertical of the university where there is going to be a lot of cross-pollination of thoughts, and a definite ground for a real research which can happen. And these young minds can definitely be cultivated to do these kinds of work. Definitely, medical science has been changing and is an ever-changing and a challenging field. One would never foresee. I never thought that we would be ending in a crisis like Corona in the beginning of the March and April. I thought this is something which will go away. But let me tell you also, I work in a small hamlet. It's called Haravali, and I work for a medical school here. The surprising thing what I found, and this you would also seen in various statistics of the pandemic which is taking place today, it is mainly the city bred and the towns which had the maximum impact of COVID. The IT guys had the maximum impact. Pune and Bangalore were the capital for the corona outbreaks. Let me also remind you, I was just going through this village in district of Ramnagar. I used to travel quite a bit during the pandemic. Lockdown was there, we could not come back to Bangalore, so I would go down and walk around a couple of places here. The amount of publicity which has been carried out through the various media which has happened, the villagers are so careful. Every village I would see was wearing a mask. Even a lady who was taking the husk out of the rice would be wearing a mask. There were a bunch of boys who were playing cricket. They were wearing a mask. And they were barricaded the entire village from anybody from coming from outside. See, that was the fear, and that was the safety measure what the villagers had taken. And I'm telling you, these are few of the things which have definitely helped us in probably curbing the incidence of this ailment, which is practically you breathe in and somebody gets it. And to a large extent today, if the local villagers and it has not taken that kind of a hit, it is mainly because of the awareness and the connectivity to the various places and the information which has percolated even to the bottom of the level. This is where I find that technology has gone down to the grassroots even to help the remotest of the people. I have interacted with a couple of people with coronavirus. I would talk to them and find out how it is in your village, how do you know it is, why didn't you take these precautions? I am telling you, Ahmad, I am telling you, I was surprised. Even a normal villager who is selling vegetables or vendor on the market, he is wearing a mask. And there are some people who say, sir, despite me wearing a mask, I've gotten this problem. Or somebody would say that I went to Bangalore, probably I got it when I was in Bangalore. So that is the kind of awareness what technology has brought about. So it is important that technology is one real breaker, and we need that at our end, and it should be supporting for various medical education programs. And the next thing I also needed is students should also form a stakeholder in most of the policy, if not the undergraduate, at least the postgraduate students. See, this is an important concept because these students are tomorrow's doctors. We wise men at the age of 65, we make a policy. Probably many of us would not even see to the end of see whether the policy has worked or not. But if I am able to take a youngster with me, a postgraduate with me, who should also be in the policy, he will definitely look into the needs. He will look into the felt needs. He will grind into the fact that this is what is to be done. He becomes a tomorrow's doctor. He will be in a better position to see that these things are done, delivered, and probably he'll be happy if he has to see what are the goals at the end of the day. But policymakers, unfortunately, happens to sit in nice air-conditioned rooms. All elderly people like me, if we have to take a decision, I don't think I'm going to live for the next 10 years, and probably I'll never see any of these things if I were to take a policy today. Just like I make a joke with most of my insurance guys, when I get a wrong call, I tell them I'm 82, you're ready to sell a policy to me. That is how it is. We are never going to see the end of the policy. So it is the right time to integrate the stakeholders, and there should be a sizable representation of the young minds, whether it be from the medical, nursing, allied health services, all these people, even today, I'll tell you, the ASHA workers, they have done tremendous work in the last couple of years. The whatever reduction in main indices, what we are seeing today in the country across, it is after the introduction of these ASHA workers. And they are just normally little trained people, much better than the stray people and the normal human beings who are, and they are able to deliver such an amount of impact on the indices which have greatly mattered for our health. I think it is high time we involve the various stakeholders. There is not one or two. It is not me I should be making. It should be a collective wisdom of multiples of people. Like when you say universal coverage, I need a proper financier. I need a proper financial expert. It is not possible for me to sit through and get through and go through it. And more important, I also felt invariably when we talk of the felt needs, one should definitely go to the grassroots to find out the felt needs. And it is high time we expose our children to these felt needs of the people and then try to develop policies which is definitely going to have an impact. And I'm very sure in the coming years, the kind of people we are training and the kind of innovation we are doing, it is very soon that we would probably be the leaders in healthcare in maybe in the next 20 years. Unfortunately, I may not be there, but then this can happen and this should happen. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to join the eminent panel in discussing the cutting edge of health and the cutting edge of technology in the backdrop of an unfortunate pandemic that we are all going through. As the previous honorable speakers have already mentioned, Corona has put out a unique mirror back across at us, the healthcare workers, as well as our technological cousins on the other side. When Corona hit the world initially, thankfully, India was slightly behind the curve. We were just listening to what was happening across the globe and sort of waiting and preparing for the pandemic to hit at its full strength. As a civilization, as a population, we've always been very good at adapting and being flexible. If you look at the past 100 years of our evolution, we were anything between 10 to 20 years behind other Western nations in healthcare or technology. But in the past 20 years, technologically, the gap has been reduced extremely fast, while healthcare is slightly behind. When Corona hit us, we found the advantages of the adage Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, where the healthcare workers from across the globe got together. We were told what is happening across in other nations who had to fight this challenge early on. We were given the opportunity to learn from the mistakes or the lessons that were happening there. And under the able leadership of our governments, the healthcare workers, particularly as the Honorable Vice Chancellor mentioned, the public health officials and the public health doctors were given the opportunity to coordinate the response to this pandemic. We have seen the intervention of technology, how effective it has been in calculating the number, as Dr. Ashok was saying, then disseminating those numbers and those messages across to even the remotest of our rural pockets of population, and how the local population have taken the message on board and sort of stonewalled themselves from this illness. We have seen a different evolution of corona in India, quite unlike what has happened in Italy, UK, or the United States of America. And we have looked into why that is the case, and we have come up with some sensible answers. And generally, if you look at it, the mortality of a critically unwell corona patient in India has been, thankfully, much less than in many other nations of the world. So our ability to be flexible, our ability to communicate effectively with the 1.36 billion of our population living in wide, varied, and distant geographies across our large nation, as well as the help that we've received from our technological cousins from across the different specialties, have enabled us to put a concerted front in fighting the pandemic. The national health policy couldn't have come any sooner, and the different implementation strategies from different departments of the government has also helped us in fighting the pandemic the way we have, be it the ASHA worker that Dr. Ashok mentioned, or the multiple postgraduates who were deployed across the COVID care centers, or the educational infrastructure using technology that we used in teaching and training up our COVID warriors to be of a certain ability, many times much better than most nations in the world, to tackle this challenge with limited resources, but at the same time, high levels of knowledge and skill. In this context, it is very useful to be discussing what technology can do to healthcare, how we can make it cost effective, as well as how we can go by the tenets of the new healthcare policy and make our country a better place to live in, be it the quality of life or the quality of health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ram. I'm happy to have got inputs from all three of you. I think it would make sense to throw open the panel for a discussion. I'm hoping Dr. Sachidanand will get his line back and he can also participate. I'll begin with Dr. Ashok. Dr. Ashok, one of the challenges in a country like India is on cost of healthcare and effectiveness of existing healthcare systems. While there's a need and a push in the new policy to reduce cost of healthcare, what role do you see for medical institutions and the linked hospitals in enabling more effective care in terms of penetration and the cost and its effectiveness? What's your opinions on this?
I've always been maintaining one thing is, it is good to have a medical college in every district, whether it be private or whether it be government. Most of the medical schools are going to have high-end care as well as bottom-end care. Everything is available. And if you're able to treat the entire tertiary care in a small district itself, small or big district, whichever way you look into it, the bulk of the problems of most of these smaller and the 2-tier and the 3-tier towns are taken care of. The medical college and the council, whether it is NMC or MCI, whatever it is on certain percentage of patients being treated free. I always felt that is a good thing and it's a good system in a country like India. We need such norms and policies which is going to tackle and take care of the needy. and if the needy is able to get the quality care, because it is a three-tiered system which works even in the medical school. There is a boss, there is a middleman, there is a bottom there. And along with that, you have umpteen postgraduates and doctors milling around. The care which could probably given to many of these people, even in the smallest of the districts, can definitely be very, very affordable. And at the same time, it could take care even of the greatest and the most difficult problem. Very rarely the patient need to go to metros and bigger towns and cities. That is one. The second thing, what has also happened of late is the government has pushed itself in this Ayushman Bharat and the various schemes which every state practically floated it, especially for the poverty, the low end people, the people, farmers, especially in Karnataka, we had a policy. They would cover to a large extent the treatment cost as far as the patient was concerned. So that way, whatever the cost which could fall on a normal man, the sufficient level of cost could be taken as a burden, and the burden from the government definitely lessened as far as the patient is concerned. The third thing is I always feel is somewhere we have to train our children to have the feel and empathy for our and make things affordable and make things Indianize it, indigenize it, make it as less expensive as possible. There are a lot of things which have come in the market of late. In fact, I've delved, spoke to a lot of innovators, spoke to a lot of young scientists who are always on the go to find out how to make things easy, like simple thing like telemedicine has been tried out today. In fact, it has been tested and tried out in various medical colleges and institutions today. So the accessibility for a patient getting into various places need not be there. Still, telemedicine is something which can be done, and it can be, we know it can be effective today. And in terms of making facility, artificial intelligence to a large extent is another thing which is going to make it less dependent on high-end skilled people. Consider a radiologist, it is always in demand. I don't even have a proper radiologist even for a medical school. To have these highly skilled people even getting into the remotest part, if I have something like an artificial intelligence, which is, I'm not looking at pathological condition, at least if it can rule out the normal conditions, and invariably I always say about 70 to 80% are always normal, nothing is there, they get well on their own, you don't have to do anything magic or anything like that. It is those 15% where the doctors can really concentrate and spend that kind of energy and time and money. So there is definitely an effort. If all of us sit together and think together, we should be able to make our Indian, every citizen who should be able to come, take treatment and get well and have a happy outcome and an ending. Definitely it should happen.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ashok. I'll ask you one more question, after which I'll move to Dr. Ram. The question I have for you is, one of the policies stated objectives is to integrate Indian system of medicine into the medical mainstream. But given the fact that the regular BBS course is so well organized, there's paramedics, there's nursing faculty, how do you see, what are your thoughts on integrating Indian traditional medicine, whether it's Ayurvedic or Unani, and build around them a robust scientific based, evidence based support system? What are your thoughts on that?
The fact also remains, sir, you cannot expect an Ayurveda to practice allopathy or an allopathic to practice Ayurveda. Vice versa is not possible, and it should not happen. Each one to his specialty, and that ends there itself. There is no question of mixing these things. It is not going to help us. Probably we are going to be in deep trouble because we don't know the other side, and the other guy doesn't know our side of it.
Our side.
And as far as possible, it is our duty to make and get these things on the science forefront. And people like Valiathan, sir, they are all working together to see that whether we can have something like evidence-based even for these Ayurveda and all these things, we can really work on it. And there is a lot of science in it. Just because I don't understand Ayurveda, I cannot call it bad. There is nothing wrong in it. Just because I am dumb about Ayurveda. But there is science in it. We have thrived in the ancient Indian system. And I think there has to be some form of revival of these ancient systems. Probably we may be better off in the next 10 years, probably the ancient systems are going to be the talk of the whole world. That can happen. But I think as an Indian, I'm proud of it. We should revive it, but we should work as far as possible in the most scientific way so that the Western world and the other world believes in it. I do not want the same thing to be told from the other side of the West, and I need to import it. That should not happen.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Ram, I was wanting to catch your opinion on one aspect. I see that one of the goals of Jeev Raksha is to save lives during medical emergencies. And if we come back to the fact of medical emergencies and the burden of handling medical emergencies, what role could your approach and the training you impart have on cost of medical treatment and its effectiveness in this scenario?
Thank you. The medical emergencies in India, if you look at the number distribution, about 80 to 85% happen outside of big cities and outside of big tertiary hospitals. And most of these patients are going to either small private hospitals or our primary health centers or the smaller secondary health centers. And before they get to the hospitals, most of the times they're being seen and cared to by non-healthcare professionals or even your lay citizen who is a good Samaritan. What we lack are systems and protocols in the pre-hospital environment to provide good quality pre-hospital emergency care or even the simple first aid. Say a person having an unconscious episode or a person having a low sugar, what we call as hypoglycemia, or a myocardial infarction, what we call as heart attack, they are not getting the basic minimal first aid at the pre-hospital environment. And by the time they traverse themselves to or they're taken to a bigger hospital, a lot of vital time is lost. So the aim of Jeev Raksha is to provide the training not only for healthcare workers, but also for our citizen volunteers, our police service personnel, our fire service, our drivers and conductors of our transport corporations, people who are most likely to be present when an accident or an emergency happen at the roadside or at home. And by providing the basic care, for example, if your leg bone is broken, splinting it properly, or if you're having a major hemorrhage from an amputated limb, cut off limb, you would die within 5 to 10 minutes. So putting a tourniquet or a tight bandage around it to prevent the bleeding is definitely life-saving. So that kind of interventions to be happening at the pre-hospital level, at the side of the patient, stabilizing them and bringing them to a tertiary care facility will increase and improve the emergency care provision in our country a lot. So Jeev Raksha's stated aim is to improve the emergency care education in the primary care setup and in the pre-hospital setup, because we don't need to make specialists in India, new specialists, because we have got one of the best pool of specialist doctors anywhere in the world and the best pool of tertiary care hospitals. What we are lacking is that between sort of link from the patient to a tertiary care hospital. By providing different grades of courses, from the one-day training for a citizen volunteer or allied healthcare professional called the Basic Care Life Support Program, a 3-day training for the nursing faculty, nursing fraternity, the Emergency Nursing and Life Support Program, where they are taught to deal and actually pick out critically unwell patients, stabilize them and transport, as well as a 4-day program for our primary care as well as a junior doctors to again identify who's unwell, see how can they be stabilized, communicate properly to the receiving center so that the receiving center and the receiving doctor knows what is coming their way and they can be prepared for it, and provide a safe transport. So filling in all these gaps through our programs, we can definitely improve the effectiveness of healthcare in India. And that is the stated aim of Jeev Raksha when it comes to emergency care education.
Dr. Sachidanand, the data on healthcare spend is worrisome. Can the RGOHS university and colleges change this picture, especially to the economically constrained Indians?
Yeah, RGOHS is mainly meant for medical education. You are talking about health spend. Health spend is all about the government spending and allocating budget for spending on the healthcare delivery system. Yeah. Yes, of course, both are inseparable. I'll come to that one by one. Definitely yes. Again, I would like to harp upon COVID-19. Thanks to that, it has exposed many of our gaps. And in the period of where we had declared lockdown, it helped us in a large way in establishing and improving the infrastructure. So it did not come for a period of decade, happened in few months. Every single bed in the government hospital, oxygen beds were created, ICUs were established, ventilators were purchased. Never before this could have happened in a normal time. So this is what COVID got us. I always feel even in a crisis, we should look for opportunities, and that's what we did it. And lockdown, if at all it has benefited in any way, is giving us opportunity to improve our infrastructure. That's one thing. Secondly, uh, I always compare with what happened during HIV era and also during COVID era. If you can compare that, during HIV era, it took more than 1 to 1.5 years to disseminate knowledge about HIV, to get across the information what the public needed. Where it took some 1 to 1.5 years. Whereas in COVID era, just one lockdown, people came to know about COVID. People have Dr. Ashok was just mentioning that he was, surprised to see even the rural area people were very aware of COVID. They were wearing masks, and also they had shut down their doors to any stranger. So that means within 1 to 1.5 months period, during that lockdown period, everybody was talking about COVID. Everybody knew why there was a lockdown, why this lockdown was necessary, and that's how it is. So all this has really brought healthcare system into main focus, and the government is definitely thinking of increasing the healthcare budget to see that more and more infrastructure is created, and we should also be ready for any such future pandemics. COVID is not the end of it. This era, this century, we are going to see much more pandemics. Many more such viral pandemics are expected. So we need to improve our infrastructure. We need to improve our healthcare delivery system, and definitely government has to spend more. So spending on healthcare delivery system is a very important aspect. Just we are also now looking at giving vaccination to all the entire population. So that itself is a big challenge to establish a cold chain and then deliver it try 2 doses for every citizen, at least to the prioritized citizen initially. This is a challenge. So we need to spend a lot. We need to keep thinking. We cannot be just building primary health centers and district hospitals and then forgetting about it. We need to put in places all the infrastructure. We need to put in place the manpower and also the equipments. All these things will definitely help, and definitely the budget has to be increased to whatever 3% or 4%, whatever it is, to see that our healthcare system improves. In medical education, you asked me a second question. In medical education, or can we make it affordable? Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences can think of making medical education affordable. As you know, there is a general perception that medical education is not affordable. It is very costly, and yes, of course, any hospital which a medical college owns is a white elephant, because hospital bleeds a lot. You need to have patients. You need to spend on patients. You need to create infrastructure. You need to keep on upgrading the infrastructure. Then new technologies keep coming in. You have to keep on adding those equipments. All this costs, and people expect very low cost healthcare. Healthcare delivery. At one end, we have high cost of infrastructure, high cost of maintaining the healthcare professionals, and on the other hand, the expectation is that we need to deliver healthcare in a very affordable manner. This is a very paradox. But there definitely is medical education when it comes to that. Government has come up with some policies where 50% of the seats of all medical college, whether it's government or private, should be given to government students, should be given almost an affordable way to students of low income group or middle income group. So that is already there. We are taking care of the best cream of the society in providing them with subsidized medical education at the cost of other with no more number of medical colleges being opened in every district. And as Dr. Ashok told, the ratio between government and private medical colleges is now almost the same, 50-50 is there. So that way, the cream of this society, the students are definitely getting the benefit of subsidized medical education through the government medical colleges. Thank you.
One of the NHP 2015 policy is to integrate Indian system of medicine into medical education mainstream. How would you transform this, and what are your views on that?
Dr. Ashok did touch upon this. Indian
Yes.
system of medicine is a very ancient system of medicine. It's a traditional way of practicing medicine, and it has been handed over from many generations to the present generation. Now, of course, there is better documentation and better available data about Indian system of medicine. We are really proud of it because any system of medicine which has stood the test of time and has been there for so many centuries definitely has got strength in it. And we need to, as Dr. Ashok put it, we need to revive it. That's one thing. So bringing Indian system of medicine into the mainstream is the order of the day. We need to integrate in the present modern day medical education the Indian system of medicine as well. There is some sort of integration which has already happened. For example, in Indian system of medicine, they teach anatomy. Anatomy is taught the way the anatomy is taught in medical schools, in modern medicine medical schools. My take on this is the integration should happen at the level of treatment. For example, let us learn the way of medicine, whether it's modern medicine or homeopathy or Ayurveda, the way they is taught, let it be taught the same way. But integration should happen at the level of treating a patient. For example, Ayurveda has got its own advantages, modern medicine has got difficult case. If we can, all three specialists can get together and try to give relief to the patient, nothing like that. So integration should happen at the level of treating patients. I can give you umpteen examples in this case. We have in our own backyard in Kasargod, one Dr. Narari is there who is treating filariasis. Filariasis is being in modern medicine. There's nothing but chopping off the extra tissues, lymphomatous tissues, and trying to give debulking. Whereas now in Kasargod, the physiotherapy, Ayurveda system of medicine, modern medicine are all combined, and a patient who was brought in a vehicle carried by 4 people walks out on his own at the end of 3 months treatment. So this is a miracle that's happening. So that is where integration has to happen. Integration has to happen at the level of treatment so that the patients benefit and the society benefits. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. There are some audience questions, and I would like to try and give some responses to this through the voice of our panelists. One question for Dr. Ashok. How would medical education be 5 years or 10 years from now? If you were to visualize, how it should be and how it could be, what changes? What do you think would change? How would it look like from a future perspective?
What I always felt was change, whatever should happen for the good. And students are the basic people, and today we talk of student-centric education as far as any education, and medical education is also follow the same. Now, it has to be made a fun learning. It has to be with all the gadgets. I always tell students should get their mobile phone. There is no need to ban them, because mobile phones have now become a part of the system as far as anybody is concerned. Why deny of these mobile phones? But if I were to integrate the specimens with something like a QR code, and they can scan the QR code and try to read about the specimen, if they can do a little bit of dissection in terms of animated or something like that, which is available for us in a 3D format, and they can do it. And if they are going to be looking into a lot of digital ways to not only have fun but also learn at the same time, I feel the retention is going to be much higher. There is going to be some amount of online and things like that could be happening. There is going to be a lot of work in terms of maybe just like you have your handheld video games and things like that, which could be a part of an education system for the future students. Many of the patients in terms of could be you can have mannequins, you can have simulated learnings, you could have standard. I mean, these are all things which is already taking shape. It is not something which is going to happen tomorrow. It's already taking shape today. But definitely in the tomorrow world, we would rather have our students who walk as the physician of first contact to be confident of handling a situation. It is not a trial basis that he sees about 100 patients and then he becomes smarter. We would have the students smart right from, if not from day one, at least from day 2 or day 3, by exposing similar scenarios and similar. So it is going to be a lot of fun. It is going to be a lot of learning, which is going to happen with fun. I think that is how the take is going to be there, and not in the next 5 years, definitely in the next 10 years.
I'm sure a lot of students and will appreciate that. Dr. Ram, Dr. Ashok mentioned about mobile phones and technology. What has been your experience in using technology, and or do you also feel that there should be fun in learning, and is that a way of making it immersive?
Definitely. Hi, Ravi. So again, we're talking about COVID and how COVID has affected different aspects of our day-to-day working, from medical education to healthcare. In the beginning, we had an opportunity as a team of trainers to go to Jharkhand and train their healthcare workers before the COVID hit the rural villages of the state of Jharkhand. But then it was deemed that Bangalore is way too infected. We don't want you trainers to come across to Jharkhand in case, instead of the knowledge you're bringing, you might disseminate the infection itself. So that is a time when a hurdle or a challenge was put to us. How are you going to tackle distances and geographies, especially in a wide and varied nation like ours, in training different groups of students, be it medical or otherwise? Definitely, training needs to be immersive. Training needs to be flexible to take on these challenges and make them into opportunities. And thankfully, we were looking at a certain technology called augmented reality, mixed reality, and virtual reality, where the student would wear something over their head where their two senses are taken off, which is the vision and the hearing is taken over by the machines, and they are straight away put in as avatars into a 3D environment. So in emergency care learning, as we all know, doctors in the panel, many times we learn from our mistakes, and it is unfair to our patients, unfair to their relatives, as well as to us, to make a mistake and then suffer from the consequences, even if it is psychological, is a painful process in learning. While these kind of technologies put you in the situation where you can make any number of mistakes, take any number of attempts to learn a certain skill or a certain aspect of medical education and become perfect at it before you actually go in and use those skills for your patients. So we are currently collaborating, that is Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, Jeevaraksha and IIT Madras are collaborating in a virtual reality with haptic feedback training program for pre-hospital cardiac arrest, where we got patients collapsing either in a street side or by a forest or by a beach, where it is an Indian environment. Many a time, all these cutting edge technology that we come across is either in New York or somewhere in Scandinavia, where all the people are of a certain complexion and all the facilities are of a certain caliber. Here we've got an Indian man collapsing in a Indian city with pan and other sellers around, the noises that we are familiar with, the buses, the honking, the street walkers, etc. And you are put in a situation where you have to deal with a cardiac arrest in a busy Indian milieu. How are you going to deal with that stress? So while we say immersive learning, while we say fun learning, it is also about recreating the stress that our students have to go through, because the research have proven that if you are going through the stress of providing a highly critical intervention and you learn it with the stress on board, your ability to come back with the skills in a real life situation is going to be much better. So with these kind of technologies, learning can be fun, learning can be stressful. And another thing which is introduced in this kind of learning is an objective analysis. In the old adage of a medical professor, if he feels a spleen on the right side, the whole group of people who are with him, who are doing the water on, also have to feel the spleen on the right side. For the technology friends of ours, the spleen is supposed to be on the left side of the abdomen. So you had to follow your professor for fear of non-objective feedback. So these kind of environments give you a very objective kind of feedback, a very detailed feedback, no matter who you are and how you're performing. The other thing immersive, fun learning environments can provide for you is a customized feedback. So even if, let's take the cardiac arrest resuscitation as an example. Is your elbow bent? How many compressions are you doing per minute? Are you running out of breath? What's your pulse rate while you're doing it? And how good is your communication skills? Because the machine is recording all the statements that you're making, all the requests or the orders that you're making, including whether you're being too harsh to your helpers or not. All these things can be picked up by the machine. And when the machine gives the feedback, it is very much like a mirror looking back at you, as opposed to another human being trying to tell you whether you did something good or bad. So in that aspect, medical education can be in future, with the help of technology, much more fun. And there are currently available models in different specialties, and we are also at the forefront of developing some new technologies. And we believe that anything and everything we make and we develop should not only be made in India, but it should be made for India. So the interface should be Indian, the experiences should be Indian. And if we can make it for India, the advantage is it won't be just contained in our country, but it, as we found out with our other programs, it is definitely going to be useful for all the other nations who are developing and who are coming to the forefront of the globe. Because our emergency care life support program, which we did, we found that when we did it in Kazakhstan as well as in Morocco many times, the only change we had to make was the species of snakes, not the conditions, not what you did to the patients, but what actually was the difference of species of snakes that bit them. But otherwise, what India had to offer was exactly what those nations and their students had to take in. So we've got a great opportunity here. And as I said earlier, because we have had a quicker technological leap, whether it is 3G, 4G, 5G, or the huge number of able engineers and technocrats amongst us in our country, we've had a quicker leap and we are at the forefront of using technology in different aspects of life. And in medicine, medical education, and healthcare, the same applies. And we've got a great opportunity now leading the world as opposed to following the Western nations. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ram. You took words out of my mouth by using words of "make in India" and "make for India." I think that was appropriate. Dr. Sachidanand, I have a question for you. RGHS has been on the forefront of bringing in change, and some of the innovations you have brought in are recognized even at a national level. What comes to the top of your mind in terms of innovations in healthcare and medical education related training, which the university has brought in? If you could mention that, and probably mention one thing you're going to push in the future, which could transform medical care and the education system.
Yeah, right from the day when the lockdown was declared, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences has been very active. We never closed down a single day. We thought, as a university, our role was to train and educate people. So we got on the job immediately and started training programs. We could reach out to almost 2 lakh healthcare workers, including volunteers, and in a span of 2 months, and try to educate every single healthcare worker in their field of expertise. If a doctor, to what level he has to handle the patients, how to recognize symptoms, what is the treatment protocol, how the patient has to be put in ICU and how he has to be treated, how oxygen has to be monitored, such detailed things. If it's a nurse, how to manage a patient of COVID, how to monitor the vitals, how to recognize when the patient has got desaturation, things like that. And for a Group D worker, wheeling in, wheeling out of patients, carrying them back to this thing, how he has to protect himself, all such things. Every single aspect was taught to all the healthcare workers. So this is what a university can do. We showed the way, and we planned it in such a way that we could rope in all the experts that we had with us, and they were very voluntarily obliged to come and teach everybody. So that became a very regular affair. And carrying on with that, now we have seen more than 75 to 1 lakh publications on COVID itself in this last 9 months. This has never happened to any other disease anywhere earlier. Every single institute, every single doctor has published, tried to put in his knowledge. So the way we treated patient during March and the way we're treating patients in November, December is entirely different. So we understood the disease much better. We came to know much about the pathogenesis of the disease and the way it manifests and the complications of the disease, all these things. In March, April, May, we never thought about post-COVID syndrome at all. By the time we were in September, October, we were talking about post-COVID syndrome. So these are things which keep changing, and we understood a lot. At the same time, somewhere in mid July or August, we planned for a innovation in COVID itself because we could do something away. We organized an ideathon, something similar to hackathon, and Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, when it published this, to my surprise, thousand students and other entrepreneurs they registered, and of course, about 200 projects were submitted, and these projects were reviewed by experts from Indian Institute of Science, Indian Institute of Management, Indian Institute of Technology. All these, experts were roped in, and they analyzed the whole projects, and we could select around 10 projects. To my surprise, how innovative our youngsters are. We could come up with something like a green PPE, the PPE kit. We know that large amount of PPE kits are being used in hospitals, and disposing them itself is a big issue.
Yeah.
And we have come up with synthesis of green PPE, which can be reused and thrown to this thing, and disintegrates very fast. So that's one advantage. There is innovation in the form of hand sanitizers, where a small capsule, if you break it, the sanitization, you could carry the capsules in your pocket. These are the innovative things that students come up with, and many more such things. And we could, through the help of Bangalore Bio Innovation Center, we could find entrepreneurs who are interested in taking up these projects and funding them. So they are going on, and now it will see the light of the day. And many such innovations. There were many who came with saying that they have some ultraviolet light beaming equipment which can kill the virus in the environment without even hurting anybody sitting in the room. So similar things, there will be so many. So all those minds which are otherwise very idle came up with ideas, and students also started thinking and came up with such brilliant ideas, and they're all translating into good action. So I would feel in future, Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences, not only COVID has given us opportunity, but not only in COVID, I would like to organize such ideathons where students should come up. Even a first year student can come up with most silliest of idea, but let us see what we can come out with. And this is where I think a university can stimulate the young minds to come up with such creative ideas. So this is what I would look into. If one thing is given to me, I would give opportunities to all students and faculties to come up with ideas, any particular disease which they are interested in. Thank you.
Thank you. That probably brings me to the last question, which I'll pass around to the panel. The question is from an animation technology person, whether a hackathon where digital animation technology could be innovatively applied in enhancing the effectiveness of medical education. That's essentially the opportunity asked for. Let me catch in a sentence or two opinions of everyone, beginning with Dr. Sachidanand.
Yeah, the future of medical education is in not only in classrooms, smart classrooms, but also in simulation labs. We have to employ so many mannequins and then try to teach students. I would quote one example of anatomy table. It's called anatomy table. There are students who load to go and sit in front of a dead body, that too with formalin and so the convenient way of learning anatomy and the easiest way is to go to the anatomy table and learn everything. Of course, you may not get a 3D effect and the feel of hang of it, but still you can learn. You can dissect the human body through anatomy, and that can be utilized. So simulation and anatomy, such 3D smart classes will going to change the medical education in the future. That's one thing. Technology is going to come into the classrooms. One. Number two, technology also is going to come into the operation theaters. For a surgeon who is going to operate on a difficult case tomorrow, he can build that whole case on the previous day, gets a hang of it, hands-on training, and then when he goes back next day to the theater, he's all fully ready and fully confident about how to handle this case. So technology is here to stay. We need to make best use of that. We can employ technology to our advantage. I'm sure it's the future generation, which were Dr. Ashok was saying, we should always encourage students to get mobiles. Mobile phone is the first initial equipment which will help us to help all the students get sensitized about the gadgets they're going to use in the future. They're going to use PET scan, they're going to use MRI, they're going to use much more robotics and whatnot. And I think the gateway to all this is mobile. We need to encourage the students to use mobile and, of course, teach them how wisely it has to be used. That's all. It should not be used for wrong purposes, but it has to be for right frame. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Ashok, your closing remark also in the context of you mentioned artificial intelligence, mobile phone, and how this should be used to make learning fun, interactive. So, what would your closing remarks be on technology and usage of that to enhance effectiveness of education?
See, one thing is technology has been going from leaps and bounds. What I saw in 2000 is totally changed by 2010, and by 2020 it has gone into extinct. The extents of the technology which has been in demand and the development is practically mind-boggling. Tell you the truth, I have never seen a system in my lifetime when I was a student. Practically never seen it even during my postgraduate days and my initial days of practice. And when I saw somebody using a system and a computer, I would say, wow, that guy must be great. But today I can tell you, I cannot live without a system sitting, an iPod or iPad or even a laptop in front of me. That is what technology has changed in me. So the same thing now, I mean, I was just hearing one of the students who was working in London. He was there in a medical student. He was there in the London Med School. This comment he made as early as somewhere in early 2000. He's an uncle. I said, surgeon, I am a surgeon basically. I said, surgeon is all about dexterity and how you perform, and it all means that guts and the way your fingers move and all the stuff. But the best thing, he looked and smiled at me and said, uncle, this all is going to change because there's going to be robotics, and robotics is where you're going to sit in your kitchen, have your meal, at the same time go on operating and removing either a prostate or a this can happen. And I laughed at him. I said, probably this is a kiddo, probably doesn't mean anything. But down today, when I really see the world which is spun out, it's hardly a decade, and this is happening. It's happening all over the world. So it is important that as a medical college, I always felt that it should be a buffet. You have everything spread on the table. It is up to the student to take the cart and see which is the best tool and which is the best thing which is good for him, and then start practicing. No more days are there that I just teach the medicine, this is the way it should be taught and this is how it should be done. Just like Professor Ram was telling you, you peel the spleen on the right side of the abdomen, that's it. That's it. Nowhere it's going to be held. It's not going to hold water anymore. So definitely the technologies of education is going to change. The learning is going to change. And from where these kids are able to handle these mobile phones, I'm telling you, it's mind-boggling. I cannot text. I cannot text with my two hands. It's always my one finger which goes on typing. But when I see in the bus stops and the various places where these kids just happily text so fast, before I can speak, the text is there and it is back also. So it is high time we take the advantage of the evolution which has happened. See, we are practically in the previous era of evolution. The evolution, and we have to stay in time with the evolution. There's no point going against it. The tide should be in favor, and tide is in favor of technology, and tide is in favor of making education fun. Fun means they're going to learn and they're going to retain it much faster and much quicker and much longer. So these animations, maybe even in terms of various 3D, or it could be in terms of having this QR codes or anything for that matter, is definitely going to be fun as far as the students are concerned. And it is a good thing. I may not be of that era to teach them, but this is going to be the order of the day in just maybe after 5 years. Not 5 years, I think still I'll stand, but beyond 5 years, it is going to be a total 360 toss. That is what is going to happen.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok. Dr. Ram, just continuing with the thread, is there some magic which you have seen, moving away from 2D, which is animation and digital imaging? Do you see technology taking it to the 3D level and interactive or haptic, all of this play a role? Is there some work which you would like to share?
Definitely. We talked about different modes of immersive learning, and I already touched upon virtual reality. I would like to talk about mixed reality here, where you, as an individual, as a trainee or a clinician, become an avatar in an already set 3D platform. So, Dr. Ashok talked about surgery, artificial intelligence, and robotic surgery. As an emergency physician, I envisage a training scenario where you are in an emergency room and different types of presentations can come across to you. An infant in cardiac arrest, for example, or a big lady having a delivery and you're having to deal with the massive hemorrhage which ensues thereafter, or a very loud and angry middle-aged man in a heart attack scenario where he's not letting you treat him normally and he's sort of being disruptive. So these kind of stressful real life scenarios being enacted around you while you are the clinician, and you can also see in the screen that whatever you do, how you move, is what your avatar is doing in the 3D environment, puts you in a unique situation where you have to pick the right drug, you have to do a little bit of conflict resolution or different modes of communication. So in medicine, we are used to learning things from textbooks, mugging it all up, then regurgitating it into your exam papers, and putting it into capsules which your professors like in their particular flavor, and giving it out to pass your oral examination. This is what you're traditionally used to as a medical student. Moving forward, you can use your unique skills and reach up to the ideal way of managing these patients under stress, doing the right thing. And here, technology can play a big role. Another point I would like to add is, again, with Rajiv Gandhi University of Health Sciences support, Jeevaraksha Trust has developed an app called Jeevaraksha itself, which is for all the volunteers who are providers of emergency care, where you can be connected to somebody who is a patient or a victim or a bystander, even where there is an emergency happening. Through GPS location, you are connected on a Google Map or the accident site and help. Not only that, you can use your mobile phone for a video call or a audio call with the victim to help and support with the care. Next step is you can actually link up to a senior provider, could be a surgeon like Dr. Ashok if it is a surgical problem, or a dermatologist like Dr. Rachadananda. Even though he's a vice chancellor, he still knows his dermatology very well. You could be linking up to any of these senior experts and taking advice in managing the patient the right way on the scene. Next step forward is if there is a disaster. I would like to go back to Visakhapatnam where the styrene leak happened. I don't know whether you're aware how technology played a role, that was immersive technology in saving lives in Visakhapatnam. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a teenager was playing PUBG in his electronic device. He was awake. Rest of his family was asleep, like most of that little town which was sort of neighboring this styrene plant. He felt a certain smell which was unusual. He messaged straight away in a very fast two-handed version to his colleagues and friends who were playing similar games across in that area, asking, "Are you smelling something?" Because I am. And they replied in the positive, saying something is going on. So they then woke up their parents. As you know, styrene is a very heavy gas. It settles down on the ground. And if you were asleep, if you didn't know what was happening, all those people who were sleeping would have died. But technology, in a stroke of luck, in the hands of teenagers who are best at it, where it was not designed, still helped in saving so many thousands of lives. Eventually, we only lost about 36 lives in an otherwise mass incident. So this app also gives you the ability to ping up that there is something going on which we are not aware what is happening, whether it's a gas, a radiation, an accident, a multi-car pileup, whatever it is, and to get the help of all the providers, all the hospitals, as well as the government agencies which are able to help as soon as possible. and make a difference to our patients on the scene. So technology definitely can help not only in medical education, but also in the care provision. And one thing I would like to add at the end of all this is in medicine, how much ever technology develops, you can never discount the human angle. That gentle touch, that smile, that caring attitude can, for the time being, as far as I can see, cannot be replaced by machines. And while we appreciate and embrace technology for all the advantages it brings on, we should also be celebrating the human values and nurturing it in our future doctors so that our patients receive the best of both worlds when it comes to healthcare, and our students receive the best of both worlds when it comes to medical education. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ram Nair. I would like to appreciate your valuable time, more than 90 minutes, in delivering this panel discussion to the audience of Tech Bharat. I'm sure the audience would really have the privilege of seeing such enlightening discussion on such a niche topic as medical, which otherwise doesn't come into the public hearing. I thank you, appreciate very much your valuable time, and hope that this has been valuable for our audience as well, and look forward to this medical education and the innovators and the panelists here making much more impact in the society. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone, for accepting this invite in spite of your busy schedule and being part of Tech Bharat. Gratitude, and we wish you the very best. Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.